Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, and this is the third of my stories, so to speak. Thank you so much for coming back. I'm glad you are enjoying them. Now, in the last one, I left you with a little bit of a cliffhanger, really, because I said I would tell you about the time found a stash of money and also the time found a grenade. And yeah, I was just sort of trying to work out exactly when this was. So I think I told you that there was this lovely farm at the back where I used to live and used to play on the farm with my friend Peter Richardson, and he's confirmed some of these things. And for a while the farm was occupied, and then later it became unoccupied. And when we were playing around on the land, in sometimes in the middle of the crop, we would do some, stupid things like getting on all fours and going through the crop so our heads wouldn't appear. We were quite young. We were about 8, 9, 10, this sort of age, I'm guessing. And on occasion, we would be in the middle of the field or something like that, and we would see the farmer coming back from somewhere. Now, I should explain, the fields were quite big and unhedged, pretty much. So there was a lot of open space, and there was this non-metalled road, this great long metal road that used to come down off the Guildford Road in Horsham. It would come down past the cemetery, and then it would come into this open area and in a great big curve come up to the farmhouse and the farmhouse buildings. And there was actually a beautiful old barn in front, sort of open barn, I guess for storing straw and things, that was on saddle stones, that at some point was taken away when the farm was derelict, and has been taken to the Singleton Open Air Museum, or the Weald and Downland Museum as they call it. I don't know which one is the official title now. I've always known it as Singleton Open Air, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So we would see the farmer drive down. So there we were in the middle of the field, and suddenly, be with my sister and Peter and some other friends, and we'd be mucking about doing what we do, and suddenly one of us would see the car and go, "Farmer!" And we would just suddenly duck down underneath the crop or within the crop and watch as the farmer and his wife, and he was pretty old at that point, would drive up to the house and then disappear. And we were always waiting for the time the car would stop and he would come marching over to us and say, "Get off my land!" But actually that never really happened, but it was still a worry. We still thought that could happen. So yeah, we would duck down and watch. Now, as I say, the farmer was old, and at one point it was occupied, and then either he died or he went to live with his son, who operated a farm sort of more north at the other end of Hillside and where I was, and this farm just became empty. Now I think the fields were still worked, but the actual house and the barns and things were just not being used. Now I'm guessing that there was a whole load of probate and various things, and it was not sold off but just kept. Anyway, the house became more and more dilapidated, which became, of course, something fascinating to a couple of young lads. So we went up to the house, and we would have a look round and look in the old barns. You could see where the cows would have been milked, and various barns. The barn I talked about on the saddle stones, you could climb up into that, and it was great stuff. And then there was the farmhouse itself, and the farmhouse was of course gutted of all furniture and stuff, and you could just go into the empty rooms and see the lino on the floor and the wallpaper, and that was sort of it. At the back of the house was a brick building, tiny little brick building, which was the outdoor toilet. And it was in there that we were just having a nose, and we went, "Oh, that's an outdoor toilet." How novel, we thought as kids. I lived in a house which in the 60s, built in the 60s, and this was probably late 60s, early 70s, had an indoor toilet, and that was the norm. But it was quite novel to see this for the first time. And there were a few trinkets and things, including this little tin on either on the corner of the windowsill or on the top of the cistern. I can't really remember, but it was buried with a load of other envelopes and books and, you know, simple things, not very much. Cobwebs, lots of cobwebs and things. Anyway, we saw this tin, and just out of sheer nosiness, one of us, and I can't remember who, grabbed it and tried to open it. It had rusted up, but managed to get the lid off this thing, and inside was a bundle of notes. And we looked at these notes and we pulled them out, and they were 10-shilling notes. Now, I can't remember how many there were. There was something like 10 of them, or 11 of them, I think. There was an odd number. And we looked at these 10-shilling notes and we thought, oh my goodness, we're rich, we're rich. Well, we didn't really know what to do because it was such a surprise. So we took these back to my house, and this dates it before I was 10. When I was 10, my parents got divorced. And I'll talk about that in another video. And so Dad had left after I was 10. He was living at home, so this must have been when I was perhaps 9 or just before my 10th birthday, or sometime like that. Came home, said, Dad, look what we found. And he had a look at these 10-shilling notes, and he knew that the farm was derelict and empty and all of that. And so there was almost pointless to try and, you know, get in touch with the owner or something. So he just said, well, you know, you should share it out. So he counted them out. So if there were 10 notes, as I think, or 11 notes, as I think there were, we had 5 each, and there was a spare. Now, I can't remember if these 10-shilling notes were still legal tender. I have that weird feeling that we'd gone into decimalisation, so we couldn't actually do anything with them, but we could keep them. But I need to just double check that, because we didn't suddenly go out and spend them as far as I'm aware. And in fact, I remember keeping 2 in a wallet for years and years, and I never knew what happened to them, but I kept them for ages and ages. But you know, like loads of things from your childhood, they all disappear, don't they? Anyway, so that was it. Dad kept the odd one, and we felt for a while that we were, you know, the millionaires, we thought. On another occasion, at the back of this toilet, we'd noticed stinging nettles and weeds and things. And this is a bit of an area where we'd discovered there were old bottles, a bit of a tip of stuff. And there were more further back by the river. But in this little bit at the back of the outhouse, we were just digging around looking for treasures. We thought of these old bottles and these clay bottles and things like that. And suddenly we unearthed this metal pineapple. Well, of course, it wasn't a pineapple. It was an old rusted grenade. No idea if it had been a First World War or a Second World War. But we recognised it immediately as a grenade, and we stood looking at this thing going, oh my God, look, there's a grenade. We rushed back thinking it was going to explode, and it didn't. Nothing happened. So we gathered some stones and we sort of threw them at it to see if it would explode, and it didn't. And I think it was Peter, because I don't think I was brave enough, who picked it up gingerly, and I think he threw it at a wall on one of the barns to see if it would explode, and we would, you know, duck down, and it didn't. And so we didn't know what to do with this thing. So we left it there, and again we went home and said to my dad, look, we found this grenade. And my dad came and had a look, and he went, oh. So he went back and he rang the police. Well, the police got in touch with the bomb squad, and the bomb squad turned up, and they looked at it, and they were all dressed in army gear, and they said, oh yes, well, we're going to have to deal with that in situ. So they surrounded it with sandbags, and they got some plastic explosives, and they attached that to it, and I think they came back with, you know, the old coil of wire and all of this, And we were watching. They kept us away, obviously, but they told us what was going on. And then they were going to do what they called a controlled explosion. So we were at a huge distance now from where it was at the farm, and at the appropriate moment they press the detonator and this loud bang and a big puff of smoke goes up, and we were dead impressed, and that was it. And they said, oh yes, you know, good job, you told us about it, and it was a very dangerous thing, and they really impressed us with the danger of it. Well, I have a sneaky feeling that having us tried to hit this thing, and maybe it was dangerous at some point and the pin just had not corroded enough. I mean, clearly you had to take this pin out to get it to detonate, and there's sufficient of it that even though we threw rocks at it and what have you, it wasn't going to do that. But there's still a sneaky feeling that they blew it up in situ for us, as a dramatic and a demonstration, and probably had a bit of fun themselves blowing it up, because they probably don't get to blow many things up in the line of everyday duty. But it really made a huge impression on us, and it was fantastic. We loved it. So yeah, that was the stash of money, and that was the grenade. We also had, near the farm, there was this old car dump. Now, you know, you get these places where if you want a new timing chain or a starter motor or I don't know, a bumper or something for your car, and you can go to these factors, can't you? And you can say, oh, I've got a Vauxhall Viva and I need a bumper on the back, and someone will say, oh yeah, they're over there, and here's a spanner or whatever, and you go in and you just undo the bit you need, and then they give you a price and away you go and you fit it on your own car. Well, I think it must have been one of those places, but again, it was now deserted, and there were a couple of cars just lying about in this little car dump at the edge of the farm, again surrounded by land that had stinging nettles and weeds and bracken and whatever, and we'd made a path to it, and we'd got through the fence, which was pretty much down anyway, and there were only about 2 or 3 old burnt out cars, and you could get in them, and you could sit there and play and drive and what have you. I think there was a couple of cars that were on top of each other. This is where the memory is a bit vague now, but I remember we used to clamber in over these things as easy as anything, and I wouldn't have wanted my children to do that at that tender age, because clearly it would have been dangerous. But when you're kids of that age, and it was all so open, and you were allowed out, we just ran out. Mum and Dad would just say, yeah, go and play. And we would go and play, either go to the orchard, as I mentioned before, or we'd go round the farm or the fields, or go down to the car dump and muck about there. I remember one of the things that we used to do is collect hubcaps. Collected these old hubcaps for things like Morris Minors, and they were lying around with nuts and bolts in them, and we would clean up these hubcaps, and just like they were like silver dishes. They were just quite bizarre, really. And each of us would, hey, look what I found, and we would, light bulbs and things, all in the muck and the mud. It was to a kid, of course, it was a huge adventure. It was just great fun. Anyway, there is more to tell. I'll tell you next time about the thing that got me into making the videos, the thing that turned me or influenced me, something that happened on the farm, in the derelict farm, that Peter and I witnessed, that made me turn to filming as a career. So join me on the next one. But anyway, meanwhile, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to follow, like and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. And I will see you then. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.